If I asked you to picture someone with an eating disorder, you'd probably imagine someone who appears severely underweight and someone who rigidly restricts their food intake. Someone who technically falls into our field's definition of what we call anorexia nervosa. But that image is dangerously incomplete, because our most common eating disorders involve binge eating, a behavior that is defined by eating a large amount of food in a discrete period of time, and importantly, experiencing a sense of loss of control. The combined health burden of bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder, what we call our binge-type eating disorders, is 2 to 6 times that of anorexia nervosa. And among these conditions, bulimia nervosa is particularly important for us to understand. People with bulimia nervosa don't just have one set of problematic eating behaviors, they seem to have them all rolled into one person. They engage in binge eating, like folks with binge eating disorder. They engage in dietary restriction or even prolonged fasting periods, like folks with anorexia nervosa. And on top of that, they have what we call purging behaviors or other compensatory behaviors like self-induced vomiting. This clinical complexity means that if we can understand the mechanisms behind bulimia nervosa, that opens up possibilities for us to reveal insights for the entire spectrum of eating disorders. But unfortunately, our treatment of bulimia nervosa doesn't quite match its importance. We've used the same therapeutic approaches for decades, and still over 60% of our patients continue to binge eat and purge. Why? Well, in part, our existing interventions often miss pretty core pieces of the puzzle. In particular, research shows that our existing treatments are quite ineffective at addressing the thing that distinguishes binge eating from overeating, that sense of loss of control. Now, patients describe this subjective experience in a wide range of ways, from feeling like their brain has shut down, or it feels like a ball rolling down a hill, or a runaway train that they just can't stop. Control feels impossible, sometimes hopeless. And as both a clinical psychologist who has treated these patients and a neuroscientist studying their brains, I've really been struck by a pretty critical disconnect. We know that this sense of loss of control is what drives the disability and the impairment and the distress associated with binge eating, but we don't fully understand what causes it. Now, some of our past research has revealed a potential key piece of this puzzle: dysfunction in this part of the brain that you see on the screen, called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain is a key part of a more complex and larger self-control circuit in the brain, but you can think of it kind of like our brain's brake pedal. It's an integral part of what helps us stop and control a wide range of thoughts and behaviors. And some of our past MRI work has found both structural differences and functional impairments in the same region of the brain in folks who struggle with bulimia nervosa. More recently, using a wearable brain imaging technology called fNIRS, we discovered that people with more severe bulimia nervosa show dramatically reduced activity in this brain region, specifically when they're trying to control their eating responses. The lower this activity, the more severe and more frequent their sense of loss of control over eating in their everyday lives. Now, that was important, but critical questions still remained. Does this dysfunction cause behaviors like binge eating and purging, or does it result from them? And could this part of the brain be a key part of treatment for bulimia nervosa? To answer these questions, we need to know if increasing activity in this part of the brain reduces symptoms. And that's exactly what our newly funded research will test. With OneMind support, we're pioneering the very first neurofeedback treatment that's designed specifically for folks with bulimia nervosa. Neurofeedback is kind of like giving someone a mirror for their mind. We measure people's brain activity, and we show it to them in real time, in this case on a computer screen using a thermometer bar. When people try out different, what we call mental strategies or thought patterns, something like counting backwards from 100 or imagining packing for a camping trip, they can see instantly how their brain activity changes in real time. And through this process, people learn to actively reshape their own neural patterns. But our approach to this standard brain training is revolutionary for 3 reasons. First, in our training design, participants tell us in each moment what mental strategy they're going to try and use. That means we know what action they're taking in every single moment, and it allows us to identify exactly which mental strategies worked best for them to change their specific brain activity. That also means that we can use mathematical models called reinforcement learning models to quantify exactly how it is that neurofeedback is working when it works. And second, our participants will learn how to increase their self-control brain activity while they're actually eating a food they typically binge eat. This means that they're learning to engage a critical part of the brain self-control circuit when the help is most needed, when they most need to be able to engage that circuit effectively. And our use of a wearable brain imaging technology is what makes this possible. Third, our intervention will bring our brain training out of the lab and into everyday life. Binge-purge episodes, like most impulsive behaviors, happen on nights and weekends, not in pre-scheduled therapy appointments. That's why, after neurofeedback training, participants will receive personalized text messages, prompting them to use the mental strategies that were specifically most effective for them in increasing their brain activity in the lab. Importantly, these messages will be delivered during what we know are particularly high-risk moments for each individual. It's kind of like having a little brain coach right there in your pocket. And to evaluate both pieces of this intervention, we'll track changes in symptoms and self-regulatory control abilities throughout the study. This research will answer fundamental and mechanistic questions about the brain basis of bulimia nervosa, while also simultaneously testing a potentially revolutionary new treatment for this eating disorder. It empowers patients to become active participants in rewiring their own brains. But the implications extend far beyond bulimia nervosa and even eating disorders. As most of you probably know, that sense of loss of control is a key feature of substance use, gambling, OCD, as we'll hear about later from Dr. Lee, and a wide range of other impulse control problems that we see in psychiatric disorders. So our approach could provide a template for precision psychiatry across these conditions. And this work that I've told you about today that's focused on the cognitive control system is also just part of my lab's larger mission to understand how multiple brain networks, along with signals from the gut back to the brain, drive decision-making and maintain disordered eating. We're mapping these mechanisms to promote a pretty major shift from managing surface symptoms to directly targeting underlying neurobiological dysfunction, a shift that we know is needed to move eating disorder treatment into the era of precision medicine and to offer new hope to the millions who are struggling with these complex conditions. Thank you.